So now that we have everybody nested, we have our timeline completely set up. Now it's time to move everybody's nested sequences into their positions on the video. The term I like to use for that is their own pane. I'm going to move each nested sequence into their own pane on the video. And that's going to be according to, you guessed it, the storyboard. So let's look at scene 1. We have our soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, respectively, top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. So let's get started by moving our soprano into the top left. I'm going to unmute our soprano's video. There she is. So our effect controls are up here in the top right. I'm going to expand the motion tab because that's where our position and scale live. A rule to keep in mind is that when we're dealing with nested sequences and when we're moving them into their respective panes, we don't really want to crop unless we have to. So I'll come to that a little bit later, but let's move. First, we're going to scale to 50%, right? Because that makes her a quarter smaller. Move her to the left till she touches. So you can see the numbers close to 480. You can kind of guess that that's what it's supposed to be. And then we'll click and drag until she moves up there. 270 is the dimensions or the position that we want. This number represents the horizontal component, and this represents the vertical component. And the anchor, I guess, that you can think about is the center of the video. So this, where my pointer is right now, is at 480, 270. Okay, so we've put her in the right place. Now let's move our alto into the right place. Unmute her track, click on the motion tab, change her scale to 50, and move her accordingly over here. Oops, over here and up a little bit. That's like 1440 by 270. That makes sense, right? Because our soprano is also on vertical component 270, and we just changed the horizontal component. So I'm going to move everybody else into their positions and fast forward a little bit. Okay, I've just completed moving everybody into their own, what I call, pane. And as you can tell, it doesn't look amazing because everybody's kind of a different size. Our bass here is pretty much the same size as our tenor, but our soprano was a bit further away from the camera, so she's a little smaller. Don't worry about that. We'll fix that later. So now I'm going to move on to the second scene. Referencing our storyboard, we have a bit of a different setup here. We have our soprano in the center, and then alto, tenor 1, tenor 2, and bass in the top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. The first thing I'm going to do is put the soprano in. So I'm going to unmute her. And as you can tell, there's no way I can adjust her scale so that she fits where I want her to fit in the storyboard, right? Because she has to take up all the height, but not all the width. So because I know she has to take up all the height, I'm going to set her scale to 100 because she at least has to be 100% of the height. And then the only way to go about fixing this is to crop her. So I'm going to click on Effects, search for Crop, and drag that effect onto the specific clip I'm editing, which is her nested sequence. Release. Now we have an added effect control here in our effects control panel where I can choose how much I want to crop her by. So just thinking in my head, if I want her to be in the middle, I need to crop her on the left by 33.3% and on the right by 33.3%. So left, 33.3, right, 33.3. And that'll put her right in the middle. Now you can tell that she's not in the center. And like I said, that's okay. We're just putting the nested sequences in their own panes. We're just aligning them where we want them to be on the screen. The next step after we finish doing this for everybody's nested sequences is to then move each individual person within their frame. So I'm just going to add the rest of the people and fast forward. So as you can see, I've arrived to a bit of a problem. I said in my head, okay, well, I want the alto to take up the left third of the screen. However, when I change the scale to 33.3%, it scales both, obviously, the height and vertical components. So she's not taking up as much as I want her to take up. I want her to take up 50% of the total height, but only 33% of the total width. So what I have to do is instead choose the bigger value for the scale, and that will be, of course, 50%, and that will make her fill up 50% of the height once I adjust her to be there. And then I want to crop her so she only takes up, for the width of the screen, 33.3%. So I'm actually going to mute my soprano so that I can see exactly what's going on here. So once again, I'm going to drag the crop effect onto my alto's clip. And this is kind of where you have to do some guess and check if you don't want to do the math appropriately. Let's just guess and check. I don't feel like doing the math in my head. Okay, as you can see, something's wrong here, and that's because in my head, I said, well, I want her to take up a third of the screen horizontally, so let's crop her on the left side, 33.3%, and on the right side, 33.3%. However, that value is adjusted by the scale. So what I really want is 33.3 divided by 2, which of course I know in my head, which is 16.65, and it'll round up probably, or down, I guess, 16.6. It's best for you to round up because it's a lot more noticeable if there are black bars in your video than there are like one person video covering someone else's video just by a little bit. It's a lot more noticeable. So I'm going to round up. I'm going to do 16.7. So now with the scale value, if I move her over here, she'll be taking up 50% vertically and a third horizontally. And remember, you choose the bigger value that goes in your scale. I didn't put 33.3 in here because then there'll be black bars. I'll show you 33.3. If I turn off the crop by clicking this little FX, toggle the effect, you can see that there's going to be black bars. If I put her here, there's going to be a huge one on the bottom. And if I put her in the middle, there's going to be a small one on top and a small one on the bottom. Okay, so we fixed our alto and our soprano's in the correct position too. And I need to move on and adjust the tenor 1, tenor 2, and the bass. I'm going to show you a little shortcut. One of the reasons that we're taking this approach and modifying the nested sequences like this and moving each person into their pane, that is, into the position that they need to occupy in the final video space, is because I can really easily copy one property onto another clip. For example, I'm going to take the alto's properties, her motion video effects, click, Control C or Command C, and then paste them onto, let's say, tenor 2. When I unmute the tenor 2, he's going to be right on top, and I can move him to where I want him to be manually, which is here, which is like 810. And as you can see, the crop didn't transfer over, and that's because I selected the motion tab only. So I'm going to go back to the alto and click on the crop effect and drop those onto the tenor 1 or tenor 2, excuse me. And now it's the exact same. So I'm going to quickly do that to both the tenor 1 and the bass. Okay, so now we have everybody's video occupying the space in the final video that we want them to occupy. Like before, people are different sizes and they're not in the center of their video panes, but that's okay. We'll fix that later. Let's see what we've got so far. I'm going to rewind a little bit with the time slider. I also turned down the volume so it doesn't just completely blast your ears. I'm also going to mute all of the audio tracks here because we don't need to hear them anymore because we know that they're synced up. So let's press play and see what we're dealing with. Teenage dreams in a teenage circus, running around like a clown on purpose. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now all we need to do is do our scene 3 and scene 4. So let's start over by muting everyone's video. And scene 3, according to our storyboard, has the soprano, alto, and the bass sharing the screen 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Let's do that. So in a similar instance as before, we want them each to occupy 33.3% of the screen horizontally, but they also have to occupy 100% of the screen vertically. So we can't change our scale. It needs to be 100, otherwise they won't take up the entire vertical portion of the screen. So I'm going to add a crop effect. So now we have our soprano on the left. For easy transferring of properties, I'm going to left click on the crop, copy it. You can also right click and select copy. And I'm going to put it on the alto and then manually just move her into the middle. Oh, she's already there. Surprise, surprise. So now she's where she needs to be. And I'm going to paste that same crop effect onto our bass. He's going to be in the middle. We're going to have to drag him over a little bit to the right. Okay, so on scenes like this where people are sharing the screen in thirds, it's pretty dang obvious that they're not in the right place, right? Our soprano's kind of in the middle, a little bit towards the bottom. She's further away than everybody else, and our bass is way at the top and a little bit closer. Don't worry, we'll deal with that later. On to scene 4. So, as I was saying before, by adjusting everyone's nested sequences and moving them into their respective quote-unquote panes, it becomes a lot easier when you have the same visual appearance of a scene, like the same setup, the same pane positioning, because you can copy every property from the previous scene that had that same setup and paste them on where they need to be now. So for example, if we look at the beginning of the storyboard, I see that I had the same setup as at the end. Scene 1 is the same as scene 4. The people are just different. So I see that the sop is in the top left in scene 1 and the alto is in the top left in scene 4. So I'm going to take the properties from the alto, or excuse me, I'm going to take the properties from the soprano in scene 1, the motion, copy that and put it on the alto in scene 4. That will put her in the top left. Now we're going to take the alto from scene 1, take her properties, put it on the bass in scene 4. That'll put him in the top right. Same thing, we're taking the tenor's properties, putting them on the soprano, and we're taking the bass's properties and putting them on the tenor. So everything worked out perfectly, and it was very easy to move those people into the right places because we already kind of made the template when we made scene 1 and moved everyone there. We just copied the properties over to scene 4. So let's take a look at what we've created so far.
Teenage dreams in a teenage circus, running around like a clown on purpose. Who gives a damn about the family you come from? No giving up when you're young and you want some.
So the audio synced, which is good, but we have a couple little problems that we have to deal with. So in scene 1, everything's good. In scene 2, we're missing this frame down here, and that's because I forgot to unmute video 5. Whoopsie daisies. So there he is. He's there. But now in scene 1, he'll be covering everybody because he's at the top of the timeline and it kind of stacks like Photoshop. And we just need to delete him because he's not in that scene. Why do we need his clip if he's not in that scene? So scene 2 is good. Let's check scene 3. Uh-oh. Our tenor's covering everything again, but he's not in the scene. Delete. Oh my gosh, our other tenor is too. Delete. Okay, that's pretty goofy, but we'll deal with that next. Scene 4. Tenor covering everything again. Delete. And we're good to go. So I'm going to give you a quick general tip for Premiere Pro. This bar right here, it's like a gray bar. It's called the work area bar. You can make it appear if it's not there already by right-clicking the little tab of the sequence and selecting work area bar. Make sure it's checked. What that allows you to do is minimize or maximize your work area. And what makes that so valuable is by selecting an area that we want to render. Let's just say I want to render this entire portion that I have here of this sequence master. I can use the work area bar to select it, and then I click enter. Once it finishes rendering, it's going to play automatically. I just stopped that so I could explain a little bit what happened. Basically, rendering is investing your computation power ahead of time so that it doesn't have to render while it's simultaneously playing the track. If clicking the enter button doesn't do anything, you might need to go up to sequence and then render effects in work area. You can see I have it bound to the enter key. And what that did was change the red bar that used to be here into a green bar. And what that means is that Adobe has created an image for every frame that's saved somewhere else. And that is what is going to be played when I hit play. You can see that there's a lot less lag because it's not having to render each frame while it's playing. So there you go. Another quick Premiere Pro tip is that if you select your playback resolution to be something other than full, it'll be a lot faster when you play back the sequence live, and it'll be a lot less laggy. That means this is a quarter quality instead of full quality. And if you're going to want to do that, you should also change your paused resolution to a quarter, as well as your playback resolution to a quarter. Don't worry, when you're physically moving a track, you want to get a pixel perfect location right. So Premiere automatically maximizes the quality. You can, if you look carefully, you can see that the quality jumps. And then when it's perfect, I'll let go and it'll fall back again. The quality will fall to what you selected, which I selected a quarter.